Filming a wedding on a Super 8 camera. How do you do it? And is it a good idea? We all know that film is super popular again, especially in weddings. There's a lot of photographers shooting 35mm again, there's videographers shooting real Super 8, and I'm going to go over that in another video, but today I just wanted to talk about the practicalities of shooting Super 8 at a wedding. For those of you who've never actually shot on Super 8 before, I'm just going to do a quick rundown of how you do it, and then later in the video, if you want to skip to this timestamp, I'll then talk more about why and specifically what I do at weddings. So how do you even shoot Super 8 in 2025? Well, first things first, you're going to need a camera, a bit like this one. This is the Cosina SM2000. Now I bought this back in 2020 for about 30 quid, all working order. However, when I looked on eBay earlier today, the most recent examples I could find where they've either sold or they are for sale was well over £100. So the price of these cameras has definitely gone up, especially since the popularity has gone up. This camera in particular has a few desirable functions, including manual exposure options, as well as a 24 frames a second option, which I generally prefer to use. One of the kind of looks of Super 8 is actually 18 frames a second, and that's completely valid, but it's just my preference is still to use 24. I just think it looks nicer. Unfortunately, not all Super 8 cameras are created equal. Some have really cheap plastic build and can break easily. Some don't have any kind of manual exposure options or different frame rate options, or they're just generally not very reliable. So you'll have to do a bit of research and figure out which brand and model kind of works best within your budget. So as I said, I think the key things to look out for are different frame rate options, including 24 frames a second. Ideally, you want to have a light meter that runs off the same battery as the motor. Now this actually doesn't, and it requires mercury replacement batteries, which are these sort of air cell batteries. They go in the bottom here and they only last about 6 months once you actually put them in, which is super annoying, but unfortunately that is just one of the trade-offs. So I definitely recommend, if you can find something where both the motor and the light meter run off the same battery, that is preferable. If possible, you want to try and get one that has been film tested, so you know things like the iris work and the orange filter, which we'll come back to, and just generally that it advances film correctly. And lastly, it's also good to check and see if it has a 1/4 inch tripod thread, because that again can come in super handy. So you've just bought your new Super 8 camera and you want to test it out. So next you're going to have to buy some film and pay for some processing and scanning. Now in the UK, the company that I use is a family-run business called Gauge Film. I've been using them for about 5 years now. They've always been absolutely fantastic. In terms of price and quality, they are far, far superior to the competition in my opinion. They haven't sponsored this video, I just really think they're great. The only trade-off being that they're a smaller business is turnaround times can be a bit longer, so you can be looking around about 4 to 6 weeks from when you send it off, but the wait is definitely worth it for the price you pay. So if you're not in the UK, there are also loads of options. Just join some groups, join some forums. People will be able to advise places to get your film processed and scanned just based on your area and everything. So there's loads of options out there. In terms of actual film recommendation, you can always start with 50D, which is essentially 50 ISO film stock. However, it's not really that great for indoor shooting. So if you think you're going to want to shoot indoor and outdoor, I'd highly recommend 200T. Obviously you can shoot it outdoors, but you can also shoot it in fairly well lit indoor locations as well. Now these are all negative film stock, so they will come out negative. They won't be able to be projected, but the scan you'll get back will have been corrected. Now, if you want to be brave, you can also look at something like the Excludes E100. That's actually a reversal film, so when you get it back, it'll be a positive print and you can put it through a projector. However, it's far less forgiving if you overexpose it. You lose quite a lot of dynamic range compared to negative film, so it's definitely something to consider. Now, it really is worth noting that film is not cheap. For one cartridge with processing and scanning, you're looking around about 80 to 90 pounds or more in the UK. So it's quite a lot, especially considering at 18 frames a second, you'll get maybe 3 minutes 20. At 24 frames a second, you're looking at just over 2.5 minutes. So you really don't get a lot for your money. This is ultimately why I would recommend buying at least one test roll before you try and just take it out straight away. You need to figure out whether your camera definitely works, whether you're definitely confident with shooting in the format, and just whether you're happy with the look overall. When you've received your Super 8 cartridge, you can load it directly into the camera. It's really easy to do so and quite hard to get wrong. One thing I would do is put a little Sharpie marker on the beginning of the film, run it for just a moment and then pull it out again and see if that Sharpie mark is gone. That way you'll know the film is advancing correctly, because sometimes it won't be, you might hear some clicking. So that's a little tip in terms of just making sure that your camera is winding film on correctly. If you're using tungsten film and you're going to be shooting outside, you'll need to enable the orange sun filter that we mentioned earlier. There should be a switch or a dial which turns it on and balances it for 5600K outdoor white balance, as opposed to the 3200K that it will be balanced with at the start. If you don't use this, your footage will be super blue and it can be a bit of a nightmare to correct it in post. As I mentioned, most cameras will run at 18 frames a second by default. If your camera has 24 frames a second, it's certainly worth a go. I definitely prefer it, but obviously if you want more out of your film, then definitely choose 18 frames a second, as you'll get more like 3 minutes 20 as opposed to 2.5 minutes at 24 frames a second. With that all set up, you can just start shooting. Now, I'd highly recommend just shooting in auto and let the light meter do its thing. Most light meters in Super 8 cameras are pretty good. Some aren't as good, so a bit of research is needed, but generally you can trust them to get correct exposure. If your camera has manual, feel free to give it a go, but obviously there's a lot more risk because you cannot see what you're filming until you actually get there. So you'll need either a light meter or to use a digital camera with the same settings to make sure your exposure is correct. Another thing to note is most Super 8 cameras have a built-in lens. It's usually a zoom lens, and they're usually parfocals. So if you want to ensure that you've got correct focus, you can zoom all the way in, focus and zoom all the way out, and you should get critical focus most of the time. Now, once you're done filming, all you need to do is take the Super 8 cartridge out of the camera, mail it off to the company you're going to use for your processing and scanning, and then wait to get it back. After a few weeks, they'll send back your negative reel as well as your digital scan, and there you have it. Hopefully you've got some great images, and if not, then either there may be a user error or more likely the camera's not working, so I definitely wouldn't advise using it for weddings. As I mentioned, this is old technology. It generally works quite well, but you can't always be sure, especially with anything film related. You just don't know if it's worked until you get the film back, and it can be quite expensive, so you have to kind of weigh the risks up if you want to do this. When it comes to weddings that I've shot on Super 8, the very first time I did it, I shot with one cartridge of Vision 350D. The footage came out really nice, although the main thing I noticed was the interior scenes were quite dark and I had to bring them up quite a lot. So hence the reason why I definitely recommend 200T over 50D. I shot really sparingly throughout the day, keeping a close eye on the film counter on the side of the camera, and I ran out partway through the day. Luckily, the couple hadn't paid for this. This was just something I decided to do myself as kind of a proof of concept, but it became very apparent that you really need at least 2 film cartridges if you want to get through a full day. So going forward now, I always shoot with at least 2 film cartridges, and I tend to go for 200T and maybe 500T for the evening, although in the middle of summer, 200T throughout the day is absolutely fine. I wouldn't recommend swapping between different film cartridges throughout the day, because you'll reset the film counter and you have to keep a mental note or make a note on your phone of how much of each film cartridge you've used. So I'd highly recommend just shooting one all the way and then shooting another, otherwise you're going to lose track really quickly. I'd say the biggest challenge with shooting Super 8 is actually, I tend to find myself having to put down my digital camera in order to shoot this. This is quite a well-built camera. It's heavy, but it is well-built, so I can kind of trust it to a degree, but it does mean that I have to be quite deliberate with what I shoot. Now, I do dual wield for a few things, especially when it comes to confetti. I'll set my digital camera to quite a wide angle, shoot in slow motion, and shoot this one in tandem, and it tends to work fairly well, but there is always a bit of a compromise. One thing I would say is if I'm going to shoot Super 8, I only shoot it when I know I've got a second shooter, because it means if I do miss something, they'll hopefully have caught it. Whereas if I'm on my own, having to switch between digital and this camera, there is a higher risk that I'll miss important moments, especially if this jams up or something, or I'm being really conservative because I've only got 10 feet left to film. But what about digital emulation? Well, that is a very good point, because emulation has come really far in the last few years. Obviously, Film Convert's been going for a while. I'm using Dehancer Pro right now on this video, and you can get some amazing results with it. So I did actually have a go at grading my most recent wedding, making the digital footage look as close to the real Super 8 footage as I could, and I got pretty close, I'd say. But I can still tell the difference. And I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that there is still something to be said about it being done for real. And on that note, is it worth shooting Super 8 for weddings? I'd say yes, but you've got to be really sure it's something you want to do and it's something you can do. I think emulation is great, and I think if you want that look for the full film, there's no other way to go. You can shoot 10 plus cartridges and make a film entirely out of that, but that's going to cost as much as you would charge to just do the video. Now for me personally, given the potential risk with shooting film, whenever I have couples who ask for it, I literally only charge them what it cost me to pay for the film and processing. I don't charge any extra. I also have them sign a waiver because unfortunately, film can go wrong, things can fail, and I make that known to them beforehand. I will offer some complimentary extra edits or extra reels if things do go wrong. Luckily it never has done, but I like to have that in my back pocket. The main thing to remember is you do need to manage client expectations. If you go in there saying, oh yeah, I can do a whole Super 8 film and then it all goes wrong, you're gonna look kind of silly and the couple may demand their money back, which is going to be a massive loss to you. So you need to make sure you manage that, and as I said, this is why I don't charge any more than it cost me to do this. I will say as well that real film really does lean into that nostalgic feel that we all love at the moment. As I've said quite a few times now, there is something to be said for doing it for real. It's the same thing that's going on with buying real old camcorders as opposed to just emulating it. So you've got people going to weddings now who are filming with amazing mirrorless cameras, and then they'll also pull out a 20-year-old Sony Hi8 camera and film a bit on that. But it all adds to the look and feel of it. There is something you can see in real film versus emulated film. It's just in the way it renders colors and the way it moves and the way the lens is. As I showed you before, you can get pretty close, but actually you'd have to do a lot of work to emulate a true Super 8 look, whereas actually it's probably easier just to shoot Super 8. If it is something you're really considering, then eBay is your friend. There's loads of cameras on there. You just need to look for ones that have been well tested and in good condition. Do expect to pay a little bit above the odds for one that's really known to be working, but the results will be well worth it. For me personally, I absolutely love shooting on Super 8. I only do it a few times a year, but every time I get the film back, I'm always wowed by it. I'd say for as long as the camera works, I'll keep shooting on Super 8, and I think even if it breaks, I'll probably buy another one, but it is a medium I like to use sparingly. I'd say next up as well, I'm also quite interested in shooting on 16mm, so hopefully this year or next that'll be something I do. So just to finish off, if filming on Super 8 is something you are considering for your wedding videos, then I definitely recommend jumping on eBay, buying a camera and buying your first roll of Super 8. Now by all means take it to a wedding, but it will probably need to be quite low pressure, or better still, I would take it out and just practice on your own time. Once you know you can do it, then great. Add it to your wedding packages and it's something that could really set you aside from the competition. Anyway, that'll about do it, and I'll see you in the next one.